Marin Cilic is in the Australian Open final, but who will he face when he gets there? I'm here to preview Roger Federer versus Hyeon Chung in the semi-finals and make a prediction. Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog. Welcome if it's your first time watching the channel, and don't forget to subscribe before you leave, if you enjoyed it, of course. It has been a tournament full of upsets in the men's event at this year's Australian Open, but number 6 seed Marin Cilic has survived to make the final two. Defending champion Roger Federer is still in contention to face him, but he may be upset by uprising 21-year-old Hyeon Chung, the world number 58. So here we are, 3 semi-finals have been played already at the Australian Open, 2 in the women's event and 1 in the men's event. Either Federer or Chung will take the last remaining place in the men's final. In a moment you can see a massive contrast between the two players. 36-year-old Roger Federer is the world number 2, he's been as high as number 1 and has 19 Grand Slam titles to his name, the most won by any male tennis player ever. Chung meanwhile has a career high ranking of world number 44 and had never progressed beyond the 3rd round of a Grand Slam until the Australian Open. Federer will be competing in his 14th Grand Slam semi-final at the Australian Open alone, which is ridiculous when you consider that Wimbledon is the major that everyone speaks of as his back garden. Federer has reached the semis in Melbourne every year bar one since 2004, but before I go reeling off any more records, this does not mean that Chung is incapable of upsetting Federer. He's not had as many accomplishments because he's right at the beginning of his career. And if you've been watching him at the Australian Open, you might be surprised that Chung has not been competing in the sport for longer than he has. He's been playing with a lot of maturity, a lot of confidence, really knowing what he wants to do with the ball on that court. Naturally, both players have had contrasting paths to come through to the semi-finals, but as far as the quarter-finals go, neither of them surrendered a set in making progress. Federer dispatched former Wimbledon finalist Thomas Berdych 7-6, 6-3, 6-4, and Chung ended American tennis Sandgren's surprise run with a 6-4, 7-6, 6-3 defeat. We might as well look at both players' paths to the semis before we go into analysis and comparing and contrasting a bit more. Hyeon Chung has an impressive list of victims next to his name. Yes, quarter-finalist of last year Misha Zverev was forced to pull out during their first round collision. However, since then he hasn't really had chance to breathe. Well, I mean, exaggeration, but you know. That was a poor use of language. I mean, clearly he's breathing or he wouldn't be here. But basically the competition hasn't let up. In the second round he was up against Daniil Medvedev, a fellow young rising star who's pretty underrated, and he dispatched him in straight sets for the loss of just 8 games. In terms of scoreline, round 3 was definitely his toughest clash so far. He was playing number 4 seed Alexander Zverev, who has shot up the rankings the past couple of years and is looking likely to reach the helm of the rankings and win Grand Slam titles in the future. Chung was down 2-1 before storming back to claim the final 2 sets for the loss of just 3 games. In terms of opposition, however, his most impressive win came in the last 16 when he took on number 14 seed and 6-time event champion Novak Djokovic. 3 tight sets there, and even though Djokovic was injured, you can't take away from the brilliant performance that Chung produced. 2 tiebreaks there, and he did not falter in either of them. Djokovic was at the event off the back of injury, but he had been playing decently, clearly, to get to the 4th round. And there was a lot of talk during that match of Chung playing a game very similar to Djokovic's in order to blast the Serbian out of the competition. Very consistent, really going for the sidelines with the balls and moving Djokovic around the court. Even if he looked injured, he did not let that put him off. And that is very key in the mental aspect of the game. So that was the 4th round, and then obviously straight sets against Sandgren in the quarterfinals, meaning that his clash with Zverev was the only one in which Chung has actually dropped a set. Federer, meanwhile, has dropped no sets at all, and with another player I might be saying that that's kind of dangerous going into the semi-finals because you haven't really been tested. How are you going to respond when you find yourself in a high-pressure situation and suddenly you're battling? Because that could happen against Hyeon Chung. But then at the same time, this guy has won 19 Grand Slam finals and has been on tour for over 20 years, so there comes a point when that probably isn't going to bother you going into the last 4 at a major. I think this is probably that point. Looking at the opposition he's faced as well, there isn't really a single player who shouts themselves out as a big challenge for Federer. His highest ranked opponents were number 29 seed Richard Gasquet in the 3rd round and number 19 seed Thomas Berdych in the quarterfinals. However, he has dominant head-to-head records against both those players players. Alias Bedene and Jan-Lennard Struff put up game fights against him in the first 2 rounds. They really went for their game. They didn't look too intimidated by the occasion, but nothing anyone has brought to him apart from Thomas Berdych in the first set of their recent clash has been enough to really trouble Federer. He's won all 3 tiebreaks he's played coming into the semis, and Federer is still the clear favourite to win the event. However, I mentioned this the other day, and Federer often manages to win, however he struggles to produce his best tennis when he is widely expected to come out on top. It definitely seemed to be a tactical move from Federer to relieve pressure from his shoulders when at the beginning of the event he was saying, oh, Nadal is favourite to win, Djokovic is favourite to win, I don't see things playing out as they did last year. And that sort of talk is something employed by Federer and Nadal and helps them to kind of stay focused, kind of shut out the media and the pressure surrounding them. But he can't do that anymore because he is by far the standout player left in the 3-man draw. And it's worth noting that Federer hasn't hit his highest gears yet in Melbourne. It's worth noting that last year he was playing a much freer game, he was nailing his marks a lot more. He had no pressure on his shoulders then because he was just coming off the back of 6 months out with injury, and in his head he was telling himself that he had nothing to lose, and that mirrored itself in his game. Really, one of the biggest questions for the semi-finals is how is Federer going to react to playing a young opponent for the first time in what might usually be a 2nd or 3rd round matchup for him? How is he going to handle that in his mind, and is he going to be able to bring his best tennis to the occasion? And if he doesn't bring his best tennis, is he going to be able to pull through anyway? Because one interesting thing about Chung is that he plays a very similar game to Djokovic, who has caused Federer so many tough losses and heartbreak over the years. If you haven't watched Chung that much and want to find out more about the technical aspects of his game, I'm going to link to a piece in the description written by someone that I know who wrote it back in 2015 when Chung was pretty much fresh on the scene. He's a really interesting player to watch. 2015 was basically his breakout year. He won 4 titles on the Challenger Tour, which is the tier below the official ATP Tour, and that saw him rocket over 120 spots in the rankings. Also in 2015, after being a virtual unknown a year or 2 before, Chung made his first Grand Slam main draw at Wimbledon, and in the first round he pushed Pierre-Hugues Herbert of France to the limits, going down 10-8 in the 5th set. At the US Open, he showed that this was no fluke, and he backed up that run with a first round win in New York, and then went down to Stan Wawrinka in round 2 in 3 tie-break sets, so that was incredibly close. But anyway, the most significant result for Chung in recent times seems to have been his next-gen ATP Finals victory at the end of last season. Quickly, for anyone who isn't aware, the ATP Finals is an event at the end of each tennis season for the best 8 male players on tour, the 8 players that have compiled the most ranking points during the year, and they face off in a round-robin style tournament to decide the best of the best, or however you want to bill it. Last year, the ATP decided to make a next-gen ATP Finals, which is for players aged 21 and younger. Same format, 8 players, round robin. The ATP really do a good job of promoting their young players, and this was an opportunity to showcase what the future could look like. And while there were players like Borna Coric and Denis Shapovalov competing there, it was Chung, who had been a bit quiet in the weeks and months beforehand, who came out on top. And whatever you think of the next gen finals and their best of 4 game sets and their lack of lines judges and other questionable things, and to be honest I was not a fan, this seems to have been the confidence boost that Chung needs. I don't think it's a coincidence that suddenly he's made his breakout run just a few months after that title, which was clearly a big one for him, because there have been younger players doing better than him to date. Zverev, Coric, Shapovalov, Alex de Minaur, who broke out the other week and made back-to-back ATP semi-finals. But currently it is Chung who is playing as if he has spent years on the tour, and yes, there is room for improvement, but he has been looking as mature as any player during the fortnight in Melbourne. He plays well both defensively and offensively. He opens up the court really well. Once he's committed to sending a player off one side of the court, he will take them side to side until he's won the point. He's not really going to try anything fancy if what he's doing is working. Comfortable at the net, good slice, and his service nothing to scoff at either. And if Federer doesn't bring his best tennis to the semi-finals, it might be his consistency as much as anything that gives Federer trouble, because he's also not afraid to take a neutral ball and go for a winner off it, or at least try and get onto the front foot of the rally. As for Federer, as previously said, he has yet to really hit his highest standard in Melbourne. However, this could be because he just hasn't been pushed enough, enough because he hasn't needed to. I only indicated because at the ATP finals, when he lost that shock semi-final to David Goffin, after people had kind of overlooked the fact that he wasn't playing his best tennis, he literally, when he was called upon in that moment, he couldn't actually summon his top level or close to his top level, and that was what was needed to get past Goffin on that day, who was playing an outstanding match, and it didn't happen for him. I do wonder if the fact that that was a semi-final and his last big event will be at the back of Federer's mind when Hyeon Chung play on Friday. But despite his poor start against Berdych in the quarterfinals, Federer still ended his match with 61 winners to 30 unforced errors, so mathematicians out there, you can work out that, yay, that's more than double. I'm not a mathematician myself, but I can do that one. Despite the hype I think I've given Chung in this video, here's the thing: if Federer plays his best tennis, he wins. I think that's a given because although Chung is a great player, he lacks experience, he still has a lot of improvement he can do on his game because he's so young. I don't know how Federer is going to react to this being their first meeting and it being in a semi-final. There is going to be less pressure on Chung unless he puts pressure on himself to get the win, and he's really just been enjoying himself and loving the tennis that he's playing in Melbourne so far. It has the potential to be a really entertaining match because both players have the variety, have the serving ability, have the speed around the court. All things considered, I think my head says Roger Federer to win in either 4 sets or maybe even 5, but I think my gut says Federer in straight sets, and I don't often go with my gut instinct, and I often regret the fact that I haven't gone with it. So this time I'm going to take a risk that probably doesn't sound like a risk and go with my gut instinct. Federer to win in straight sets and play Marin Cilic in the final. However, anything can happen. So there's the preview and prediction for this one. Thank you for watching. Let me know your predictions for this one. Do any of you have Chung causing an upset? Let me know. I just remembered that someone asked for the Australian accent, and I'm not really trying that hard right now, but I just kind of sound British with like a little tint to my voice. I'm gonna wave my Australian flag because it's Australia Day on Friday. Okay, enough Australian accent. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.